Hello, everyone, and welcome to another interview here on Coin Bureau. And today I'm being joined by Alexei. He is the co founder of Build on Bitcoin, aka Bob, and they're building an innovative Bitcoin hybrid layer 2. So, Alexei, welcome to the Coin Bureau.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Okay, so we got a lot of questions to get through today and not that much time. I just want to, before diving in, just quick disclaimers. Coin Bureau is obviously invested in Build on Bitcoin, so we've got full disclosure there, guys. But let's not let that detract from anything. I think, Alexa, I want to firstly start off with now, there's obviously a lot of projects building on Bitcoin as in the layer 2 space. And can you explain in simple terms for our viewers what exactly Build on Bitcoin or Bob is and how your approach, your hybrid approach is unique?
Sure. So Bob is a layer two. And as all layer twos, our goal is to take the transactions from the layer one, where they're slow, they're expensive, and allow users to execute them on the Bob platform, the Bob chain, in a cheaper, faster way. And specifically because we operate in the Bitcoin space, the goal is to unlock smart contract functionality so we can finally build DeFi primitives targeted at Bitcoin users, because on the Bitcoin layer one, you today cannot really do that. Bob's approach is unique in the sense that, yes, we of course are working towards Bitcoin security, but it doesn't stop there. The vision that we have, and that's why we call it a hybrid, is to not only be connected to Bitcoin. So if you think of Arbitrum on Ethereum, right? Arbitrum sits close to Ethereum, has a trust minimized Ethereum bridge, so you can bridge from Ethereum to Arbitrum. The vision for Bob is to achieve the same thing for Bitcoin, where we use things like BitVM, but we don't stop there. We believe that Bitcoin, of course, is the largest digital asset, but Ethereum is the innovation powerhouse for DeFi, and it's very important to combine the best of these two worlds. And that's why in our hybrid design, Bob is constructed in a way that we can also maintain trust minimized bridges to Ethereum to allow Ethereum users to deposit their assets onto Bob in the same seamless manner as you would deposit your assets from Ethereum onto Arbitrum or Base. And the way we achieve this is we use Bitcoin finality as essentially the tool to ensure that these bridges are secure. The idea is very simple, right? Everybody trusts Bitcoin. We can all agree that Bitcoin is secure, and we can all agree that if Bitcoin breaks, our industry is probably doomed anyway. Um, and this simple but very strong primitive assumption, we can then use to say, okay, instead of introducing some third-party bridging network and very complex cryptographic primitives like you see a lot of third-party bridges do, we just say we'll use Bitcoin as the anchor chain. We'll use Bitcoin security to not only allow you to bridge Bitcoin into Bob and always get it out. That's of course that's what we definitely have to achieve as a Bitcoin focused project. But we then also say for an Ethereum user, if you're bridging your ETH or ERC20s from Ethereum into Bob, that you can do this as long as Bitcoin works. As long as Bob has finalized on Bitcoin, you'll always be able to get your assets back. And this works for two reasons. The first reason is because we can all agree that Bitcoin is secure. Everybody can agree, right? If you're an ETH user, a Solana user, we all kind of, if there's one thing we can agree on, is that Bitcoin is secure. And the second reason this works is that Bitcoin is very simple. It's very easy to verify Bitcoin transactions and the Bitcoin blockchain, Bitcoin finality from within Ethereum. This has been possible on Mainnet since 2016 already. You have a Bitcoin-like client. So the same thing that you have on your mobile phone when you have a Bitcoin wallet, right? You don't download all the Bitcoin data, which is gigabytes, but it's just like a few megabytes, and that's all. That's enough to verify that her transactions happened. And we can do the same thing easily on Ethereum. So, and now it gets a bit more technical, but when you're using Arbitrum and you want to withdraw back to Ethereum, you have to wait for these 7 days. That's when Arbitrum, or Ethereum specifically, the Ethereum bridge contract, is waiting to see if there's any challenges or fraud proofs to show that something went wrong. Well, the idea is that instead of looking at Ethereum fraud proofs, we look at Bitcoin fraud proofs, no matter which chain you're bridging in from. So if you're bridging from Bitcoin, obviously we'll look at Bitcoin fraud proofs. If you're bridging in from Ethereum, we'll look at Bitcoin fraud proofs on Ethereum. But you can expand this to Solana. Solana would then look at Bitcoin fraud proofs, and Sui or Aptos would look at Bitcoin fraud proofs. And it is very easy to implement, and it allows us to create trust minimized bridging experience to any chain. So you can go from any network to Bob and have access to native Bitcoin liquidity and Bitcoin security. And the cool thing is you not only can trade Ethereum against Bitcoin, you can trade Ethereum against Solana, against anything else, and then withdraw to whichever layer one you're coming from. But you don't trust a centralized provider, you trust Bitcoin. And if you zoom out and you think about it, that's what exchanges do today. If we want to exchange Bitcoin for Sol, for Tron, for some other asset, you'd usually go to an exchange because that's the easiest place to do that, right? You deposit from any chain, you buy the token, you withdraw to the other chain, but you trust the exchange. And with this hybrid design where we have Bitcoin as a security, as the base layer, we only need to trust Bitcoin, which, in my opinion, I think we can agree on this, is one of the easiest things to assume
Mm.
when building a product like this. So, in summary, we use Bitcoin security to allow, of course, Bitcoin deposits and unlock Bitcoin DeFi, but then also allow users from all the other networks to deposit into Bob as a Bitcoin secure platform, and you only have to worry about Bitcoin being secure.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Coming back to this concept of the trust minimized bridging that you guys have, and if I recall from your position paper, the unique method for the fraud proofs when it comes to the light client, where they can challenge, and this unique challenge concept where it's not where you've this unique design you guys have implemented. Can you explain that more specifically around why this is unique for you guys, and the method you use to minimize this bridging trust?
Of course. So there's the unique piece here, and that's new essentially to the entire market, is that we can now do fraud proofs on Bitcoin. This is what BitVM, this new technology, enables us to do. The name itself, BitVM, might be a bit misleading because it sounds like it's similar to the EVM or the Solana VM, but it's actually not a virtual machine itself. It's a tool that allows you to run any computation off chain and then check whether it was executed correctly by having these fraud proofs. So I would say I ran this computation correctly. And then if you disagree, because you know exactly what if let's say it's simple, like it's multiplying 2 times 10. If I claim it's 19, you obviously know that it's wrong because you have all the information and you challenge me. And the idea here is that instead of really running the full program on Bitcoin, which is very expensive and often doesn't really work because we run out of space, we only run a very small part of the program where I manipulated it. So let's think of it this way: you have 1,000 lines of code. We cannot fit 1,000 lines of code into a Bitcoin block, right? Oversimplified. So what we do in BitVM is we say we split them up line by line, and then you identify what was the line of code where I changed the program so it doesn't return 20 if we're calculating 2 times 10, but says 19. And then you only challenge this and you run only this program in Bitcoin out of the 1,000 lines. And that's enough to prove that, oh, okay, this is not correct. And the cool thing is that Bitcoin can run programs, just very small ones and very simple ones. And that's how we create fraud proofs on Bitcoin. So instead of running the entire computation, you only run a small piece to prove that I was wrong. And that's how you can enforce correctness. Like it's the same approach as Arbitrum uses. But the cool thing is it's on Bitcoin. And
Mm.
the security then is enforced by all Bitcoin full nodes. With the one assumption, you have to assume that somewhere someone is online. So you only need one person in the entirety of the network that is online that will trigger the fraud proof. And that's a very, very strong security model because this could be you, this could be me, this could be whoever is using the product on Bob could just be online. And if something was wrong, they challenge.
Yeah, so
And that's,
one of the parties to the
yeah.
transaction could just challenge it.
Exactly. And this is
Yeah.
what's I think what a lot of teams are working on the Bitcoin side. It's called BitVM, specifically the newer version BitVM 2. Now, the unique thing that we do is we say, okay, we get Bitcoin security. We can now use this to bridge from Bitcoin into Bob, secured by Bitcoin using these fraud proofs. But then when we want to bridge from Ethereum to Bob, instead of relying on a third party bridge, right? Like Wormhole or somebody else, which are all great products and they work great today, right? But in the future, we really want to have better security models. And what we say is that we will, on Ethereum, we'll implement a bridge contract that looks very similar to what you would use with Arbitrum or Base or Optimism. But while arbitrum based on optimism, they look specifically at the Ethereum fraud proofs. So fraud proofs posted to Ethereum, we modified that contract to look at fraud proofs posted to Bitcoin. And it's a small and very simple change. It's a very simple concept, but very, very powerful, because you essentially now trust that someone on Bitcoin will do a fraud proof if something goes wrong on Bob, which is a very easy thing to trust, because this, again, could be you, it could be any ETH user. Anyone can post data to Bitcoin, anyone can trigger a Bitcoin transaction. And the beauty of this design is that I'm very sure we can convince an ETH user that, hey, like, yes, you can bridge to Arbitrum and have Ethereum security, but if you're bridging to Bob, you have Bitcoin security. And then we get into this debate of, is it secure enough? And I think, again, the one thing we can all agree on is Bitcoin is secure. That's its main property.
Mm.
So the technical side of it, the complexity resides on Bitcoin and BitVM and getting that part to work. But then expanding this to Ethereum and then other chains is very straightforward. And that's why we're of course so excited, and of course we're biased, but that's why we're so excited about the concept. Is it's very simple, it's very easy to build, and uh, generally simple solutions tend to work better.
Yeah, makes sense. Um, okay, so currently now Bob is launched. You've obviously, and you can expand on this in terms of you've got three phases to. Currently, you launch as an OP stack on an OP stack that's obviously leveraging it. Ethereum developers can deploy liquidity, and it's got this unique forward proof. But then you've got another phase, which we can talk about, phase two, which is the merge mining phase, and then finally the final phase, which is the holy grail, which is eventually ZK rollups, Bitcoin ZK rollups settling on the main chain. So can you just quickly run our viewers through exactly what these three phases are, and how far in the process do you think we are? Because it's not just Bob, it's more broadly around the concept of teams working on settling ZK rollups on main chain. How far along in the process are we to get in breakthroughs on that side?
So in terms of time to market with BitVM, I think we'll see first prototypes of bridges by the end of the year, from our side, and I think there's other teams that are making good progress. Until we get this into production in a way that I would say, let's put 100 million plus into this, it'll take time until into the next year, and you want to be cautious with bridges, right? The one thing they do is provide security. So if you rush it and then one of these different teams launches something that breaks, it just damages the trust into this technology, because very few people actually look at the code. It's this community trust building, that there's enough people that understand the code, look at it, and gradually you get familiar with the tech and you trust it. So I think it's going to be a process, because the thing with new technical things is the technical risk initially is higher than maybe the institutional risk of a centralized bridge, but it gradually, at some point, there's a like the technical risk becomes lower than the institutional risk. And I think that will happen sometime towards the end of next year. We'll start getting more and more comfortable. And I wouldn't want to rush this. This is one of the most important developments in Bitcoin in the last decade. What's plus minus 2 3 months if you can guarantee better security of user funds? Although, of course, like I want this as quickly as possible, as everybody else does. Um, from Bob's perspective, we, as a hybrid, we also take our go-to-market. We view it in a hybrid way. So we start as an ETH rollup, and we do this because Ethereum is where the DeFi innovation lives. That's where a lot of the new DeFi primitives come from. That's where the DeFi power users reside. And frankly speaking, I would argue that the vast majority of Ethereum DeFi users are also Bitcoin users. They have Bitcoin somewhere. Either they already bridged it over to Ethereum, or they have it in their wallets and they have not yet bridged it over because it's a hassle, it's painful. There is no easy way to actually get Bitcoin into Ethereum, because you have to use WBTC or some other Bitcoin versions. We have to go through KYC and you're gonna have to go to merchant, and it's not as straightforward as just using ETH and stable coins on Ethereum where you can just buy them. Sure, you can buy wrap BTC as well in DeFi, but again, if you're starting with Bitcoin, it's the problem is getting it in. And so with Bob, we start with, okay, we decided to launch first on Ethereum because, one, our goal is anyway to always be connected to Ethereum, and B, in our opinion, with BitVM not ready yet, there is very little difference between me running my own multisig, as many other Bitcoin L2s are currently doing, or connecting to Ethereum, where we get the benefit of network effects. We work with the best infrastructure teams. That's why Bob became a super chain member. And we can actually get Ethereum security through fraud proofs, which makes us more secure than all the other Bitcoin L2s on the market today. And that comes out of the box. And of course, yes, you have to, it's a controversy. You're focusing on Bitcoin, but you're connected to Ethereum. But that's the whole point. We want to combine the best of these two worlds. And so that's what we've been focusing on so far. We launched an Ethereum that allowed us to really speed up the go-to-market process. We have the best infrastructure. There is no difference between building on Bob, Optimism, or Arbitrum or Base today. You have the same infrastructure, the best-in-class tooling, oracles, bridges, on and off ramps, whatever you need. So that allows Bitcoin builders and us as well to focus on the Bitcoin things. And that's why we build things like Bob Stake, which is a one-click staking interface that allows you to deploy your Bitcoin into a variety. I think it's 10, 15, and it's going to be 20 plus by the end of the year, different Bitcoin assets, different products, right? So you have DeFi vaults where you put your Bitcoin and it's deposited into DeFi and you put it to work there, be it on Bob, but also into Ethereum, which is pretty cool. So you can tap into Ethereum liquidity, but still use the primitives that we build on Bob. You can deploy it into CDFI vaults, right, that earn things or do things on centralized exchanges if you like these kind of products, and institutions do like them. Or you can tap into newer things like Bitcoin LSTs and liquid staking with things like Babylon and others coming to market where you use Bitcoin to secure other networks. And the cool thing is you have 20 plus already live today. And as a user, it's very hard to choose and they all have different interfaces and you have different steps to get there. And what we've done is we've abstracted this completely. It's like one click and you can deploy. And we do this using intents. And as you can see, this is the same technology that's emerging on Ethereum. And our focus is making this accessible to Bitcoiners from day one. So that Bitcoin, for the first time in a decade, has the same new innovations that Ethereum has around the same period of time. So that's phase one, really focused on making access from Bitcoin into DeFi as easy as possible using the tools we have on Ethereum and then building tools that we need for Bitcoin. This does not yet have Bitcoin security, and we do not yet have a trust minimized Bitcoin bridge, and we're very transparent about it. In phase two, we add Bitcoin finality. And there's things in between, so likely the first BitVM prototype will be ready before phase two goes to mainnet. And by that time, most likely, Bob will already have on Ethereum side transitioned to a Zk rollup. So because these are all like building blocks that we'll need later for the final stage of Bob in phase three. But in phase two, in terms of Bitcoin security, what we then do is we say, okay, we're an ETH rollup, we have ETH security, that's great for Ethereum users, but now we want to actually also provide Bitcoin security for Bitcoin users, because if I'm using Bitcoin, I prefer to use it on a network that has Bitcoin security. And for this, we will introduce a so-called finality gadget, something that takes the Bob state and makes sure that it's finalized on Bitcoin as well. So you have Bob gets finality from Ethereum on one hand, and still will use that as the main settlement layer initially. So you have ETH fraud proofs or actually then ZK proofs on Ethereum. But at the same time, you have a group of nodes, and these can be merge miners or stakers. And this is currently in review, which of these two models are better suited, specifically in regards to the BitVM bridge, which works better with the bridge. And that's what the one we'll implement on mainnet. We have testing for merge mining, and we're experimenting with staking, and we'll make a decision within the next month. And let's call them just finality node providers. So whether it's miners or it's people who stake the Bitcoin, they look at the Bob chain, what's going on the Bob chain, and they just verify that yes, everything's correct. So it's an additional layer of security, because now if you want to attack Bob, you would have to attack the sequencer, and you'd have to attack Ethereum to prevent either fraud proofs going in, or if once it's a ZK rollup, you can only freeze the chain, you can't really cheat. But in addition, you'd also have to attack the subset of the Bitcoin full nodes that are participating, right? You don't get full Bitcoin security. It's not every Bitcoin node, but you get either all the miners or the majority of them, or you get a lot of Bitcoin stakers that you would also have to attack to break Bob, which should make Bob the most secure chain in production, because you'd have ETH security and Bitcoin security at the same time. And the cool thing is that with this Bitcoin finality, we can then implement the BitVM bridge. Because what many people don't yet know or haven't quite realized, but BitVM works really well for things that are Bitcoin related. So because you have the same primitives, you have things that are already available on Bitcoin, things that post some information to Bitcoin in terms of, finality, like timestamping or checkpoints. That's easier to do a verify on BitVM than, let's say, an Ethereum like client.
Mm.
or a Cardano like line or another chain. It really then depends on the chain that you're connecting to, and that becomes really complicated. But for Bitcoin related things, so staking or merge mining, it's much easier and simpler to build within BitVM to ensure that we have this security verified just because you're using native Bitcoin primitives. And that's a very
Mm.
practical approach, a very pragmatic approach, I guess, of thinking about this. But what this then gives us at the end of phase two is if a Bob is an ETH rollup with Ethereum security with additional Bitcoin finality, and for the bridging side, ETH users use the Ethereum bridge, which is secured by Ethereum, and Bitcoin users will use the BitVM bridge that relies on the security provided by these Bitcoin nodes. So the miners or stakers, which gives us a very robust model. And I think we could stay there, to be fair, because it's better than anything else on the market by a long, long way. But ultimately, what we want to get to is having full Bitcoin security. And that really works when Bob has scaled. Because the missing piece then to having full Bitcoin security to going from a subset of nodes are securing Bob from the Bitcoin side to every node is implementing BitVM for the entire rollup. Or if we get OPCAT by then you might be able to run the ZK proofs directly in Bitcoin. We generally don't bet on forks, so we want to be independent of these grander decisions. And for this, we'd have to post data to Bitcoin, execute more
Mm.
transaction, more kind of complicated transactions on Bitcoin, either posting data or running proofs, and it's expensive. And because it's expensive, and we want to be competitive, of course, with Ethereum L2s and other platforms like Solana in terms of fees, this really works well once you have a lot of users, because then the cost per user is not noticeable, right? What you won't care if you pay a cent more once you're big enough and it costs maybe 1 cent more per user, but you would care if it costs you $10 more, because that, of
Mm.
course, makes these designs not really competitive. And that's why we have this gradual approach where, okay, right now it's pragmatic, we're very transparent, we're getting ETH security, and we focus on Bitcoin tooling and infrastructure while we're building out these Bitcoin, this hybrid kind of phase two model with Bitcoin security and the BitVM bridge. And then when these things go live to mainnet next year, will be the most secure L2 in production with Bitcoin and Ethereum security with a trust minimized ETH bridge and a trust minimized Bitcoin bridge. And then we can start scaling, also allowing other ecosystems to connect like Solana or Tron, Ton, or whatever else, wherever else you have people who have Bitcoin that want to use it. And basically in this more native environment. And finally, once Bob has grown and scaled enough, or we found a magical way to reduce the costs of doing these things directly on the Bitcoin layer one, then we can transition to this final kind of, it's not the holy grail because the holy grail doesn't exist, but this really exists, right? We can actually get to this phase three where we have Bitcoin security, but it just will cost more. But again, once we're big enough, the costs will not matter to the user. And that's, again, a pragmatic approach to achieving this, because we don't only care about being the most secure chain. It has to be usable. Our goal is to make Bitcoin DeFi accessible to everyone. And this means finding the right balance between UX and security.
Yeah, it's a very pragmatic approach. The Incurious, obviously, you're not rushing it, which is right, the right approach. But I guess you mentioned there next year. So is that when you think in the rollout of phase two could start, or what's the timeline like on that?
So I think, right, the things will be ready on mainnet. And
Mm.
I think we can have like testnet versions of both already by end of year,
Okay.
latest Q1, and then gradually go to production. And the question is, which of these things are which of the things can we launch with training wheels on, and which of these things are really a full upgrade where you cannot go back? And the cool thing is with adding Bitcoin security, well, you can launch it with training wheels on, where you say, okay, it's additional at the start. And if that breaks, you don't halt the entire chain, but you run it in parallel, see if it stabilizes, you keep improving it. And at some point, you will, as a community, then through a governance proposal, flick the switch to say, okay, now this is locked in, and we require this additional Bitcoin security as well on the Ethereum side, because that's the kind of the interesting piece of work here. The ETH L1 contract not only waits for Bob to finalize through a ZK proof, but also checks, does that proof then have the sign off by the merge miners or the stakers? So we can run this in parallel and then keep it optional. And eventually, once we're sure that it's stable, flick the switch. And same with the BitVM bridge. You can put the bridge in production, but also say, well, it's not the only bridge on Bob. It never will be the only bridge. You can have different Bitcoin bridges. There's going to be different preferences. But gradually, maybe start with like lower, smaller amounts. Let people not deposit all of their savings. because they think this is the best solution, but gradually start doing that. Um, and of course, from our side, we'll also be putting in our Bitcoin there, and like from our security budget as a honeypot, right? So initially start like that and see, okay, if anybody can find vulnerabilities, okay, that's your bug bounty. And start also with the foundation's money essentially, and maybe like other people are willing to contribute, like other protocols on BOW that would benefit from this are willing to contribute to the security budget. And then gradually, as we gain more and more confidence, you roll it out to mainnet in a way that you say, okay, now trading wheels are off. Um,
Okay.
and again, these things will be ready, but then the question is, what do we recommend users should be doing? Ape in, or maybe okay, let's give this some time, gradually start using it. And I think generally with these rather complex systems in terms of like the architecture wise, on the lower level, it's important to prioritize security if the main product is security, which it is in the case of bridges.
Yeah, makes sense. So you mentioned, I guess, and now you're in the phase one. May you launched your mainnet, and I'm curious to know how that's been going, right? Because it's, obviously, I think you've got now over 100 million TVL people staking. So how's it going in that perspective? Is it above or below expectations? And what's some of the most interesting findings there?
We definitely see a lot of interest from the Ethereum community to start using Bitcoin more, and we've seen a lot of inbound kind of liquidity flowing from Ethereum into Bob, mainly in the assets that people are already familiar in. So WBTC is usually the starting point, and then people start experimenting with other assets. Right? You have different LSTs like Solve, for example, is one of the largest Bitcoin LST providers in the space, and they have a quite a big chunk of liquidity already on Bob, because their users gradually then kind of switch and try this one because they can already kind of start staking in Babylon. Although the mainnet isn't live, they can start getting exposure to that. We've seen a bunch of DeFi protocols migrate from Ethereum, from smaller to even big ones that say, okay, well, we want to get exposure to Bitcoin and work with Bob to develop our own Bitcoin strategy and start working on more Bitcoin oriented products. And we have a few bigger ones in the pipeline that we'll be announcing soon, where we really work together with them on, okay, how do we take the product and then make sure it's really useful for Bitcoin liquidity, for different Bitcoin asset classes and so on. So overall, I mean, it's been going really well. I think, of course, this whole fight for TVL is something that chains love doing. We try to be pragmatic here, and we're not just interested in TVL because, sure, you can, of course, realistically, a lot of the TVL is incentive driven, and capital is mercenary, rightfully so, right? I mean, people will go where they can make most on their capital. But I think it's important to also figure out why, like, would they stay? And that's what we have been focusing on and really iterating on the product side. So we have, because having launches an OP stack, super chain member, it's really easy for us to get all the infrastructure lined up, get the DeFi primitives going. We have Uniswap, for example, which is now the biggest DEX on Bob. Um, and that's the official Uniswap v3 deployment, which is a very robust DeFi primitive, which we have out of the box more or less now. What we then focus on as a team is plugging in Bitcoin primitives into this. So allowing you to stake directly from the Bitcoin blockchain. You have Bitcoin in your Bitcoin wallet, you can get it directly into Uniswap with one transaction, right? Things like this, making it more accessible, and then working with users, talking to teams to figure out what is it, what are the biggest problems for them to get Bitcoin into the system? How do they want to, like, what are their target users? What's their Bitcoin strategy? So we've launched like Bob Stake. We've launched also something we call Bob Pay as a prototype, where you can send Bitcoin around and get access to both Bitcoin and EVM wallets without really having to deal with keys. And it's kind of a trade-off between full self-custody and kind of this model where you work with an MPC wallet partner, where one key is in a custodian and you have the other key, but it just allows you to log in with your Telegram or your Twitter, and I can send you Bitcoin to your Telegram or your Twitter. You can start using dApps by just using social sign-ins, really kind of bridging the gap between Web3 and Web2, which is a trend in Ethereum, but it's something unseen and unheard of in Bitcoin. And what we do is, again, we focus on making this accessible to Bitcoin builders who previously only had access to Lightning as their main kind of primitive. And now we have tools that really look and feel like a fintech app, but still give you the choice to export your keys, and you get access to DeFi, and you can, as a user, choose how much security do you want to entrust yourself with, and how much do you use some like semi kind of custodial models with. So overall, it's been really interesting to see how people interact with the platforms, and we've had like different user bases experiment with these. So we ran a Binance Wallet campaign, for example, where the majority of users are, I guess, beginners, right? They're not they're not DeFi experts, and it was really interesting to see like how they would interact with the platform, where the drop-off rates were, what did they struggle with, and that allows us to continuously improve the UX and the products. Because again, the goal of this is unlock Bitcoin DeFi, make it super easy for you to use Bitcoin in decentralized finance in a secure and accessible manner. So we get people off centralized exchanges and grow the pie. Because what we don't want to do, and I think that's what a lot of layer twos are doing right now, is they're fighting for the same ETH user base, and that capital is moving around. And what
Mm-hmm.
Bob is focused on is bringing new users in. And it's a tougher job and requires building new products and primitives. But it's also much more exciting and also much more rewarding because you actually solve problems for real users that previously did not know how to use Bitcoin with DeFi. And now suddenly we've made it so easy that it's just one transaction. And that unlocks ways, that unlocks completely new user groups. And to wrap up this kind of pitch of Bob, I guess, um, what we've also been focused on is, of course, we're not just it's not we have like the stake app where you can go and experiment yourself, but the goal is not for us to be the distribution channel, but to work with partners, with wallets, institutional custodians, staking pages, um, mining pools, institutional staking providers, to allow their users to stake Bitcoin and to deploy Bitcoin into DeFi, and for Bob to become the backend for them. And that's been our focus. And we've announced already staking rewards as a partner. We've announced Everstake as a partner, right? So we have a staking aggregator, as an institutional staking provider, and we'll soon be announcing partners on the wallet, the mining pool, and the institutional custody side. So we have like one big partner across all of these distribution channels. And then we work closely with them to figure out what do their customers actually want, what are their customers' needs on the Bitcoin side, what's their user story, how do they actually use their Bitcoin, how do they want to use their Bitcoin, what's important for them. And that's how we can gradually and continuously improve the product, which is maybe not of course you have like a lot of we could go out and talk about how like throw around fancy buzzwords, but of course like you have to actually ship a product that people really love using. And we found that this hybrid approach where we use the existing Ethereum primitives and we can then add the Bitcoin stuff to then make it work for Bitcoin has proven to work quite well, because Bitcoin has massive distribution, Ethereum has innovation. You combine the two and you get ideally the best of both worlds. And we'll see if we're right, but so far it's looking pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, it's the Bitcoin L2 space is really fascinating. I think this whole concept of being able to unlock this, $1.3 trillion asset class utilized now within DeFi. And I was on a panel about 2 weeks ago with Fisher from Babylon and Mihailo from Polygon. And then just more from a macro perspective, you obviously are bullish on the Bitcoin space and the L2 space, as otherwise you wouldn't be building an L2 on it. So I'm just curious, how do you see it evolving, at least 5 years out? Let's projections like, where do you see it in 5 years' time? I'm curious to get your perspective on that.
There's two ways of looking at this. If you look at the numbers and the market opportunity, it's a huge market opportunity, obviously, right? And we can say that it's huge, but you can also quantify it. If you look at Ethereum, you have around 30%. If you compare the market cap to its TVL in DeFi across ETH and L2s, 30%, right? That's the
Mm,
ratio, TVL to market cap. And Ethereum has a $300 billion market cap, right? But if you look at Bitcoin, it's 0.1%. That's currently being deployed in DeFi. Now, if you expect us to solve this problem and grow Bitcoin DeFi to at least the size of Ethereum, that's a 300x growth opportunity. And if we
mm,
talk about, well, what are the exciting things we can do with Bitcoin? Well, one of them is staking, right? And again, Babylon did a really good job on going to market. They have $1.5 billion staked. Ethereum LSTs and LRTs sit at $46 billion. That's 15% ratio to Ethereum's market cap.
mm,
Now, again, extrapolate this, and then you can, you can estimate that, okay, if we get staking on Bitcoin to the same adoption levels as on Ethereum, that's a $200 billion market. So
mm,
the numbers speak for themselves. It's a massive opportunity. I think it's one of the biggest opportunities that we've had in crypto, but overall, probably in fintech for the last decade. And with a new and now is actually the right time to be first or like on Bitcoin again, because the tooling is there. We've had breakthroughs with BitVM and staking, and Maybe Bitcoin gets an upgrade. We'll see how long it takes. But in the next 5 years, I'm definitely sure we'll see one more upgrade at least. And that's the thing. And there's been a shift in community and mentality. And people are now okay to use Bitcoin for more things. And you see with the ETFs and some institutions are moving in and they want to do stuff. And now DeFi is also okay at the same time as Bitcoin becoming more attractive as a productive asset class. So if I zoom out and we look at, into the future, 5 years from now, not just talking about numbers, but I think what you'll see is you'll have Bitcoin layer twos. Bitcoin will become the DeFi hub. You will start seeing chains and apps, instead of going first to Ethereum, they'll pick Bitcoin. Why? Because you have the same primitives. You have all the same things that you have on Ethereum with a much broader community and a much larger user base and a much more diverse user base with institutions, businesses, retail users that actually use crypto day to day, not only for as a financial product, but actually for day to day transactions, because that's just how they use finance, right? And as you see this already right now in Latin America, where it's still stable coins, but they also use Bitcoin. And these are usually, culture-wise, Bitcoin-dominated regions where people really know about Bitcoin and they've heard about Ethereum. They, of course, they build on Ethereum as well, but most people don't care about anything else. And I think the big flippening that I expect to see happening in the next 5 years is, number one, people will prefer to go and build on Bitcoin layer twos than go to Ethereum or Solana because they get all these computational benefits that will be commoditized. But what nobody can achieve as Bitcoin has achieved it is this global distribution, the position as really potentially hard money or digital gold or whatever you want to call it. Two, the flippening that I expect to see as well is that the amount of Bitcoin that's in ETFs will be lower than amount of Bitcoin in L2s, or vice versa. L2s will amass more BTC deposits than ETFs. At least that's what I hope, because ultimately that's what we should be striving for. And I think that's an ambitious goal. But ultimately, if all the Bitcoin lands in ETFs, have we really succeeded at,
Yeah,
building
yeah,
a
exactly.
decentralized financial system?
Yeah, it's fair.
Um, yeah,
It's interesting because I asked the same question to Fisher, and he's like, he said, but in 5 years, 50% of all Bitcoin will be staked. So it's ambitious, but I
it's
think it makes
ambitious.
sense, right? It's ambitious, right? You may as well be earning yield on that, right? I mean, you may as well be earning yield that you hold in as a store of value. Um, so I know we're running short on time. So I just want to touch base in terms of or touch on some of the most exciting things you guys have got coming rolling out in the next 2 to 3 months, and more specifically short term. I know that you continue a campaign in terms of points campaign. I'm just curious in terms of what else we should be looking out for and our audience should be looking out for.
So again, splitting this into tech and product. On the technical side, you'll see prototypes of the Bitfam bridge go live,
Mm-hmm.
and then pushing it to testnet probably by Q1 next year. So you can really go and bridge and test the Bitcoin so end to end and start getting the experience. And us then plugging this into our Bob stake interface to again hide the complexity for users. So you don't have to, run nodes or anything to bridge in, but you just, one click and you get your Bitcoin and Bob. So that's on the technical side. You also see upgrades to the core ecosystem, or to the core system with ZK proofs going live, and then us then releasing the clear specs and then the testnet for this hybrid security like phase two, where we get Bitcoin finality. And that's we're aiming for by generally we focus on releasing these things around big events. So the target is Denver. So again,
America.
Bitcoin Denver, not last year it was ETH Denver and we turned it into Bitcoin Denver. This year will be there again. I think it'll be a big contingent of Bitcoin projects. So that's kind of the technical side. On the product side, we're making a lot of improvements to the DeFi ecosystem to make it more accessible. So that's almost instant withdrawals or fast withdrawals, that getting rid of the 7 day delay period and fixing that so you can just easily get your assets in and out of Bob, allowing you to directly deposit from centralized exchanges and other on and off ramps. So allowing people to get stable coins and other assets into Bob as easily as you can now already get Bitcoin into Bob. So you can come from both ways, either from Bitcoin or from centralized exchanges, and do that with just one transaction. And we'll see more Bitcoin vaults, I'd say, without using kind of any words that indicate financial gain, but vaults where you can do something with your Bitcoin in different ways. And you'll see more DeFi vaults and interesting strategies where you can use Bitcoin LSTs together with big lending protocols, and we'll have some big heavy hitters deploying on Bob in the next couple of months. but at the same time also leveraging the fact that we're connected to Ethereum and starting to plug into the big liquidity pools that you see on Ethereum to allow our users on Bob to also tap into that. Again, hybrid designs which
Mhm.
combine the fact that it's Bitcoin, you can onboard it, but at the same time you can do something with it on Ethereum, but also continue using it on Bob. Um, Not giving away too much, hopefully, but I
Yeah.
think uh, these designs are very interesting, and we have a lot of teams that are building in this on this, like building these products right now. So you'll see our ecosystem of different Bitcoin products grow rapidly, but at the same time, you'll see a lot of bigger partners on the distribution side start plugging in and then, or like they're already working on it, but then start launching their kind of integrations into this Bob one-click product so that we can actually make it accessible to more retail users. And that's essentially the goal, right? Bring in institutional capital, which forms the base liquidity layer, and then allow users to start experimenting with doing different things, transacting, pay at with low fees, easily accessible, and ideally not even have to worry about EVM or Bitcoin wallet, just abstracting that completely, and positioning Baba as the best place for any wallets, um, I guess, fintech app, neobank, mining pool, institutional staking provider, anyone who has some Bitcoin ambitions and plans to allow users to do more with the Bitcoin. Our goal is that they come to Bob and say, okay, this is the easiest way for us to do this. I have all the products here, robust infrastructure. It's super easy to integrate. It's only one integration versus doing 20 different ones. You'll see many more of these announcements and integrations go live over the next couple of months, which essentially will then trigger also or accelerate the growth of users and really people using the products because it actually solves a problem for them.
Okay, and where can our viewer? We'll obviously leave links to everything. Where would you want viewers to keep up to date with this? It'd be like on your Twitter and your Docs website. Where would this usually be announced?
So obviously Twitter is the
Yeah,
place that we're most active on. We definitely hope that Bitcoin gets its own Farcaster version. Nostr works well, but
yeah,
it's not quite there yet. So for now, it's the Twitter app.
okay,
And definitely also check out the app.gobob.xyz page, which is the Bob
okay.
app, where you have access to, again, this one-click deployment of Bitcoin. You
Mm,
can bring in your assets from Ethereum. You'll have the asset route from centralized exchanges. You'll have an overview of all the dApps. We have a feature enabled early stage of Bob governance where people use their points to vote on their favorite dApps week by week, and then gradually we start using this to score apps, to also have people look at the security kind of things and like indicate whether they trust the dApp or not. Um, and you can become active in this and already start becoming an active participant in this community and contribute, essentially like make yourselves heard, and highlight your favorite app and so on. That's probably the two places I would recommend users go to. So Bob on Twitter, which is built underscore on underscore Bob, and on the GoBob website,
Bob,
which is app.gobob.xyz. Yeah, but you'll have them in
yeah,
the links,
we'll
I
leave it
guess.
down there for him. Well, thanks a lot, Alexa. This has been a very fascinating conversation. Like I said, I'm really excited about everything that's happening in the Bitcoin space now, this renaissance that's becoming a revolution. And it will be really interesting to see the approach that you guys have taken, this hybrid approach. It sounds the most pragmatic and practical way to go about it. So be really excited to see how it rolls out. And yeah, we'll keep up to date. We'll keep our audience up to date with all your announcements, and hopefully get you on sometime towards the end of the year again with some more exciting news coming from Bob and the broader Bitcoin L2 space.
Cool. Thanks for having me.
Cool. Thanks a
Bye
lot,
bye.
man. Appreciate it. Cheers.